Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Visionary Dawn podcast. I'm your host, Huber, and this is my co-host,
Daniel Meany. Always fun to be here. Yep. Who's our guest this week? Or do you want to introduce our guest this week? Sorry.
No, you can do it this week. You can do it for this. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I can do it for this week.
Yes.
When you roped me into it 30 minutes before. Jonathan, it has been lovely talking to you for an hour and a half, but introducing you feels a little beyond my personal capabilities. I'm going to be very straightforward there. So, if you would, go ahead and tell everybody just a little bit about yourself. What our main, focus for the Visionary Dawn podcast specifically is we like to look at different small or mostly just independent creators pretty much across mediums because between me and Nick, we pretty much touch every medium for artistic creation and being able to do it on your own, get your work out there, get noticed for it, have it become a, stable income kind of thing has been something that I know dozens of others have been trying, dozens of others have been trying to get going. And so mostly what the podcast looks at is, people who have, been able to follow what they love doing, especially their creative interests or their collective interest, and how it's been able to work for them, things they've learned, good lessons, bad lessons, stuff to kind of avoid when you first get started, and whatnot. So
right. Well, first of all, thanks guys for inviting me on this podcast. It seems to be it's just not the first time I'm doing this, as you guys know, but actually it's almost a year ago. No, sorry, it's just over a year ago in October that I did the podcast with my dear friend, Mr. Mibbs, Monster Island Buddies. So you guys, so you said like the creative, my background is classical animation, and I used to work professionally in it was about 5 or 6 animation studios for 8 years. And then I needed to take a break, and I was tired of being laid off because you're hired for contract work. So I was doing layout and design on a number of cartoon shows like Arthur. You guys seen Arthur? Everybody?
Yeah.
And I worked on Caillou for 3.5 years. Jesus, I used to say Caillouseless.
I was about to say, I'm pretty sure you just set off a trigger alert in half the parents' brains.
No, it was bizarre, but so was Arthur actually. But I really enjoyed working on Animal Crackers. That was a comic strip for many years, and then I took a break for a little while, and then when I got back into it, I decided to start teaching. So I went to work for somebody else when I was living in Montreal because I'm in Canada. And after about a year, I then moved into Ontario to be with my wife, and I opened up my own business in 2008. So I teach the underlings how to draw cartoons properly, and it's actually been much more much more pleasant because kids don't judge, right? When you're working in a studio, I remember because you had to sometimes audition to get onto different shows. And I remember this one director said to me, "Can you even draw?" And I was like, well, at the time I graduated in 97, which was the best place in the world to learn classical animation. And, there was 2,000 people applied to this one program. 150 of us got in, and only 47 of us graduated. Like it was terrifying. And this is the college where, Warner Brothers, DreamWorks, Disney, all those big studios, Klasky Chupo and whatnot would come. And at the end of the, when you're graduating and you've got to work on completing your graduating film, all these studios would be sitting in an auditorium watching your film, and they'd make notes of who they wanted to interview. So you can imagine, the stress was beyond what you can even imagine. So, I would say to the guy, well, I did graduate from Sheridan College. He goes, I don't care about that. He goes, that's a school. I'm like, well, I've also been working here for a couple of years. I don't care about that. Can you draw? And I was like, okay. And I remember I was waiting to go to LA for a vacation. And I said, well, I kind of need to know if I got on this show or not, because if I don't, well, then I'm not going on vacation. So I had to do a test. I got on the show, and then I took my trip to LA, and I came back and I was working on the show. So, that type of thing was always very interesting, that, you're always going to find some pushback from somebody. And because there's always somebody that says, well, that can draw better than you, but there's also people that will kind of put that in your face. And I just kind of got fed up with that. So when I took a break after 8 years and I started to work teaching kids, I was terrified, because I was like, okay, well, I've always been a big kid myself, and, working with them, it took, because I literally had to just walk in there cold turkey and start teaching. And it ended up being an amazing experience, because my first gig, after there was 8 or 10 weeks of teaching, we were doing cell painting, and this little 8-year-old boy was like, everyone had cleared out. I was just cleaning up and getting ready to leave. And this little boy was there, and I looked at him, and he said to me, "Will you be my dad?" And then he hugged me, and I was like, oh my God. I immediately have my hands up in the air, right? Because you're not allowed to touch these kids. And he's just hugging me, like he's hugging me really tightly. And I just said, wow. I said, that's like, I didn't know what to say, but I was like, that's a very nice thing to say. I said, but you have a dad, right? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, how about you go home, show him some of these drawings and things that you do, and say, hey, Dad, could you draw with me, or could you do this? I left there, and I was like tearing up, because I thought, what did it take for this kid to say that to me, and what was going on at his home, Mm-hmm. So it was, from there it was, and I played jokes and stuff on other kids and whatnot, but there was, it was a hell of an experience, and it still is. So I take pride in that, because I've run into instances with bullies and stuff like that as well, which I was terribly bullied as a child. And so whenever I see that now, I put a stop to it, and I make sure that it doesn't happen again, to the best of my ability. So anyways, from there, I got into toys. I've always loved toys, but I got into collecting the prototypes from Trendmasters, because, and I mentioned this to you guys already before we were set to record, that Osmosis Jones was the big thing for me. And, I love the film. I wasn't crazy about the live action, which is the consensus, I think, for probably most people, but I thought the animation was absolutely brilliant and so well done. So I used to always check, eBay, looking for Osmosis Jones stuff, and there was never anything available or that I could find. And then one day something happened, and I punched in Osmosis Jones toys. And maybe I punched in prototypes, I don't know, but a little thumbnail came up, an inch by an inch of Drix. And I was like, wow, is that Drix? And so I clicked on it, and sure enough, it was some photos from Toy Fair. And of course, as typical, back in this was late 2003, the image, was literally like an inch or 2 inches, whatever it was, and not enough for me to start drooling over. But right then and there, I went to eBay and found there was a set of the 10-inch Osmosis Jones and Drix prototypes on eBay, and for $50. And I said, I'm going to win these. And sure enough, I was like a sniper bidder, going to bid during the last, few seconds. And my computer then, the monitor was, as I mentioned before, it was like the size of a gigantic TV from the 70s. It was about 200 pounds, the monitor. And my computer froze. And I literally cried, because I said, Jesus, they're right there. And after learning that they were unreleased, what am I going to do? So I wrote to the seller, and I said, hey, any chance you have another set of these? And he said, well, I did, but I sold them last week, and I also had the car. And I was like, the car? Oh, wow, I didn't know there was a car. So I went into the completed listings and came across, the car that it sold. Again, not very expensive. I don't know if it was $50 or $100 or something like that. And that was back when you could see the user IDs, before they blurred everybody's name out. And so this was the same guy that won the Osmosis figures. And they sold for, I think it was like $51. I wrote to him and said, hey, any chance you would sell me just the Drix? I'll give you $250. And right away, he's like, no. And then I found out he already had one. I was like, oh, I was like, oh man, greed, right? So, from there, I went, as I said, above and beyond. I didn't know anything about Trendmasters, even though I had found out a few years earlier that I had a Slimer from them, from the Extreme Ghostbusters line. So I decided to go into full resource mode because I've always considered myself to be very resourceful and highly intuitive. So I went through 8,000 listings of just toy sellers in the St. Louis area. And I ended up sending minimum 800 emails, copy, paste. I put together little images that I sent to everybody. And people, I maybe got 350, 400 responses that said, I have no idea what Osmosis Jones is. Where's Trendmasters? What is Trendmasters? What's a Drix? Don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, can't help you, blah, blah, blah. And I was very frustrated. And it went, it went cold for 2.5 weeks or so. The whole process took a month. And then out of the blue, I got an email that said, hi, your message was just forwarded to me. I'm the head designer from the Osmosis Jones toy line, and I have everything you're looking for plus more. And then you could just see the fireworks going off behind my computer, right? Because I said, this is the message you wanted to get. So, and I did a huge purchase, 2 huge purchases from him. And, the next day they're arriving by FedEx, and I was, happy as can be. And then I remember, because what happened was the guy that was selling them, I remember asking him if he had, access to any more than whatever. And he says, I don't, but he says, let me see if I can get, someone from someone else. And he responded back to me, I think about 2 weeks later, he had a 5-inch Drix that he sold me. I believe it was $200. Yeah. And I didn't even know about the 5-inch version. All I knew about was the 10-inch one. So I got that. And then I started to get more curious. And I was like, well, what else did Trendmasters do? And that was when I got wind of the animated Godzilla the series toy line. And so this was 2003, beginning of 2004. And so the Godzilla the series was 1999. I was working in animation at the time. I had graduated in 97, and I was unfamiliar about the cartoon. So from there, I said, like, the Cyber Godzilla was such a beautiful, like, figure, that the stance, it was so dynamic. I got the tail and everything. Yeah.
So and we're gonna have to find a picture of it at some point.
Well, I can supply you with photos if you guys need to add those in. And sure enough, I went to eBay and there was magic again. The Cyber Godzilla was listed there for $150. Irony is, it was the same seller that had the Osmosis Jones prototypes. So that one I did win. I nailed it for $267. And I think because of my issues to pay him for the Osmosis figure, I don't know if it was the $200, he said to me, do you have the money? And I said, no, give me 4 days and I'll get it. So I was selling my massive collection on the rock band, The Police. And I had a bunch of rare stuff. And so I had sold some of the 7-inch singles, and within 4 days I had the money. So I paid for it. And then I think it was about a week later, he listed another Cyber. And I didn't even think about, well, I should grab that one too. But I guess I honestly should. And I believe it sold either a similar amount or a little bit less. So I think I actually ended up buying the other one from, because I found this guy, because people always say to me, how do you find the stuff? Well, I can't even begin to tell you, how many emails and stuff I researched. I researched the hell out of Trendmasters. And I was able to, the funny thing is, here I was correcting some of the ex-employees. For the Doom Island line, Kumonga, I remember talking to the production manager from the line, and I ended up buying 2 of the Paintmaster samples from him. Mm-hmm. And we were having a discussion. I said, these did make it to the boxes. And he said, no, it's impossible. He says, I would have known. They never made it to the box. So then I sent him pictures of it in the box beside, the prototypes I got from him. He says he fell out of his chair. He says, oh my God, they didn't even tell me this. How was I was like, yeah. So, and then just recently in my group, it came up that one of the members, he ended up buying 2 of my Mega Mutation prototypes. And he surprised me when he found a 10-inch Space Godzilla Doom Island in the box in awesome condition. Yeah. Wow. And you're in the group now, Nick. So you didn't see that? No.
I didn't see the I didn't see the Space Godzilla post.
Yeah. But the even bigger surprise, he found which I had never seen before, was a boxed supercharged Doom Island Godzilla. These all came from this guy in Taiwan, and I was like, holy crap. Like, I mean, I had a picture of it in the catalog, but as far as I knew, up until, literally a month ago, I had never even known it made it that far to a box. And, it looks exactly like the green one, but, the thing that makes the Doom Island line so unique is, not to mention the packaging, it's the black wash on all the figures, right? Which that was a direct competition with McFarlane toys, because their toys had the gruesome reality and the blood and all that stuff. I'm one of the rare people that's not a fan of most McFarlane toys, and that's fine.
Really?
I like Trendmaster. Yeah, I find the Trendmaster stuff is a lot of the complaints is, oh yeah, the muscles and the steroids and all that stuff. I said, you know what? Hey, it's fine if you don't like it. I think they all have character. That's the thing that draws me to them. I don't care if Baragon has big shoulders or Angirius is on two legs. I mean, people still freak out about Biollante having legs. I said, well, in reality, doesn't that make sense? If she's part Godzilla, I could see her having those big, thick, thunder thighs and whatnot. And I said that was just Trendmaster's take on her. So I enjoyed all of it. I mean, there was some stuff I didn't really care for, but for the most part, I thought it was absolutely, incredible. And people assume that it was the Godzilla 98 line that sunk them, and that wasn't the case at all. That was 98, and they closed in the fall of 2002.
Yeah. So what I was just going to ask as my first question. I was going to ask, was the rumor true that the 98 sales because they were dropping because of the movie is what did it, or was it something else that?
Well, I all I know is they brought in millions and millions of revenue for that, and I know the problem was after the original hype died down, there was too much leftover stock on the toy shelves. So Walmart was the biggest retailer for Trendmasters. None of the retailers wanted any more Godzilla, period. That's why the animated line was halted, because Walmart said no. And a lot of the Trendmaster staff despised Walmart because they held that power to make those decisions. Ironically enough, you guys fans of Jurassic Park, or okay? So there was a new Spinosaurus set that was supposed to come out. It was called the Fierce Battle Pack with the Spinosaurus, Allosaurus, and an Atrociraptor, and they were all I think they were all repaints or not, but that just got canceled. And again, same reason, Walmart said no. So I think because Mattel's been on a steady stream of producing a lot of new Jurassic toys, and I think maybe some stuff is just sitting on the shelves too much, so they said no. So if you come across a set of those, they would be prototypes, and obviously they would be rare, even though they're just there's nothing different about the molds. It's just a repaint, and I have a thing for repaints. I had recently, a couple of years ago, came across some baby Godzilla 1998 figures in the most outrageous colors. You've got metallic purple and blues. You had a burning one, and then you had one that looked like to be inspired almost from the Chaos Effect line from Jurassic Park.
Ooh,
and I was like, wow, this stuff is absolutely fascinating. And they were one of a kind paint jobs. So I've been slowly posting those in the group, and I don't know, man. It's after collecting primarily Trendmaster prototypes for probably exactly 20 years now, the fact that still to this day I can come across something I didn't know about, like the supercharged Doom Island Godzilla, blows me away. Yeah. I thought they were way ahead of them, in the whole creation thing. I mean, the Mega Mutation. You guys are familiar with the Mega Mutation line?
I am.
Doom Island.
He is. Yeah, I was going to say Nick is definitely the figure.
Excuse me,
master.
Oh, bless you.
Of us.
Well, I mean, the Mega Mutation line was interesting. I shouldn't say line; it was part of Doom Island, but they did Destroya and Godzilla, and the Godzilla was the biggest Godzilla figure they had ever done, but never released in the classical Godzilla figures. And I thought it was interesting because it was set for Doom Island, of course, and it was like mid 1990s. And Trendmasters was looking at what was big and popular at the time, which was Jurassic Park and Transformers. So the creative team there came up with the idea that, you know, you had Godzilla and you'd push a button and his chest cavity would fly open and this massive spike would come out, like it was thick. And then it had shoulder blades that could fold into its back or extend. And then there was rotating spikes in his in the thighs. And I thought, like, first time I saw that, because, you know, in the catalog, it just looks absolutely beautiful. I like the way they photographed it and whatnot. And, you know, people were still criticizing the power-up line, right? Like, what the hell does Godzilla need, you know, missile launchers for and all this stuff? And because obviously they well, yeah, you know, yeah, on the shoulders and whatnot, and you know, all the armor. But of course, he didn't need those things. But that was just it's for playability for kids, right?
So he can fire missiles at Ghidorah. Duh.
Yeah, who was also armored up, right?
Yeah, power up.
You'll not see Digimon. Hello. This concept is not new. We need it.
Yeah. So I mean, who was it who just asked me about the? Yeah, someone just said to me, I think on Instagram, did you see the Playmates versions, which was very similar, or I guess inspired by the Mega Mutation line? And I thought, you know, it even says it in the name, Mega Mutation, right? Because it's like it mutates into, you know, something even more ferocious. If people just look at it and say, well, that's ridiculous, but it was still very cool if you think about the concept, Jurassic Park and Transformers.
Yeah.
So I'm just one of those guys who just appreciate it. Like I had said, if I was living in the U.S. or I was an American citizen and I had graduated from animation college, I would probably go, you know, try to get a job at Trendmasters.
Yeah.
One of the perks is they used to have dollar giveaway Fridays for the prototypes. Imagine that. Yeah, they'd have the prototypes and you would pay $1. I'm like, then why would you ever leave the table?
Yeesh.
Wow, that's crazy. And speaking of the Mega Mutations, I was about to bring up the Destroyer. Like, I'm a big fan of the Mega Mutation Destroyer because I love the spike. It comes out of the chest. He's got the little, like you said, the rotating things in the thighs that come out, I think, for Destroyer. I love the sculpt they did for that, too. It's a shame we didn't actually get Destroyer out on the market because he's the last Heisei monster Trendmasters didn't do yet.
Right. Well, interesting enough, I mean, is you know, everybody loves the Space Godzilla from Trendmasters, right? They said that was the most on par for being an accurate sculpt and whatnot, I guess, based off of that poster. And I'm friends with the sculptor who made that, and he said, like, you have no idea what was originally planned. Like, he has the original sculpt. And I mean, I've been friends with him since 2004, and I still haven't seen a photo of it. And he has it. And so, because he
like,
said,
you wouldn't believe it in a good or a bad way.
No, like he said, like, it's much more fierce. You know. So, and I was like, damn, I keep saying it. Like, I spoke to him 3 weeks ago. I said, you know, I'm still looking for a phone. He doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have a computer. He doesn't have a camera. And I'm like, okay. So I guess I'll be waiting for a few more years, but I haven't given up. And why did I mention that? I think there was something to do with the designs. Oh, right. Okay, so Destroyer,
the designs and everything for
right. So I had figured out on my own, because I said the sculpt for Destroyer was pretty incredible too. And then I remember from the head of prototype from Trendmasters, I had picked up like an unpainted red prototype of Destroyer. And when I got it, first thing I saw under the feet was it said Tezuka Hobby, 1995. It was a vinyl model kit. And he had told me it was Trendmasters, but it wasn't. Then I figured out that was the that was the reference piece that Trendmasters used for their own.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because it's almost, see, what happened was there was another person who, he wasn't an ex-employee, but he did work with Trendmasters, and he had a painted version of that Tezuka Hobby model, and it was painted like in the Doom Island colors, and underneath the foot in black Sharpie it said TM 1996, and I think it said Doom Island or something like that. So that's why I automatically assumed that it was Trendmasters and whatnot. And then I think I didn't notice the copyrights on it because of the paint. And then how many years later? Probably 8 or 9 years later, that was when, the head of prototype guy from Trendmasters contacted me, and he sent me a photo that had a resin, a Mega Mutation, Destroyer, and the red model kit. And so when I got the red model kit, I was looking at it, and it was like super light. And, I said, well, this right away, I saw the copyrights. I said, this isn't Trendmasters. And I said, so how did I get 2 of these from people that worked at Trendmasters telling me it's from Trendmasters, but it wasn't? I said, well, obviously it's a reference piece. There's no other reason why they would have it, right? So that made a lot of sense. And meanwhile, I had the resin and plastic 11-inch Destroyer prototype, which I still have, which is quite something. But I ended up, I sold the FEP prototypes, which is the final early production prototypes of Destroyer and Godzilla as the Mega Mutations. Mm-hmm. And the guy who I just said got the Space Godzilla and the Supercharged Godzilla from the Doom Island line, like almost in perfect condition in the boxes. He now probably has the biggest and probably best collection of the 10-inch unreleased figures from Doom Island, right? Because nothing was ever technically released. Again, such a shame.
It is such a shame because I mean the Biollante looked incredible. I was also a really big fan of the Megalon Doom Island they did, because I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the Godzilla Wars one they did, but when they put the black wash on it, all like the scales and everything popped.
Yeah,
it's like it was gorgeous. I was like, wow, it's a beautiful Megalon figure. Like
unfortunately, the wings are still just as fragile on the Doom Island one as the Godzilla Wars one. So I don't know what's up with that. But as I mentioned, the black wash was a direct, like, in competition with McFarlane toys for the more realistic, gritty look to them, which I think a lot of people probably don't even know.
Yeah. I do remember at G-Fest, I did see a Doom Island figure once in person. It was a Varan that had a black wash on it, and it was in the packaging. I saw a Varan Doom Island once, and that was, I really wanted to get it, but he wanted, to be fair, it's a fair price, I think, for what it's worth, but I did not have the money at the time because I was trying to get some other things done that weekend. He wanted like $300 for it.
But you know what? That's the Varan is one of the hardest ones to get.
Yeah, to be fair, I was like, no, it's a fair price. It's just the money, right?
So it was carded, and the card was in decent condition.
Oh yeah, no, the card was perfect. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Like it was the figure was like in a box. It had the card right next to it, and he was in this kind of pose, like how he is, like that, with his like claws out and stuff. And it was like pretty much brand new. It was great condition. That's the only one I've seen in person. The other ones I've only seen from your Facebook group. Right.
There was an interesting connection to that. Is you guys know Matt Frank, of course.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I know Matt Frank.
So I was talking to him because he was always after me for an animated Godzilla prototype or something, and he said to me, he says I held one of the 10-inch deluxe Godzillas in my hand at one of the G-Fests, and the guy wanted $400, and I said, that's it. That to me is cheap. And this was how many years ago? I don't know, probably 5 years ago or 6 years ago or something like that. And he had a picture of him holding it, and he said he put it down, which was his mistake, and he went to go, I guess, check his money, and by the time he came back, it was sold. So the moral of that story is you don't let it out of your hands. and that's why you say you take what you can get, whether you have to, borrow money or whatever. And I told him, I said, I will find that prototype for you, whoever bought it. And I did. I tracked down the person who bought it. And I remember talking to him, and he wouldn't budge. And then I gave the information to Matt. I said, well, maybe you can help. Maybe you can do some drawings for him or something like that. I don't know if he pursued that or not. But again, it's like my resourcefulness light going on that I was able to track the guy down. And sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I was actually going to just mention something. So I was actually kind of wondering if you got a hold of this prototype, because when we were talking earlier about you going on eBay and buying the prototypes, I was in a bid, and this was a couple of years ago, and I'm still kicking myself I didn't win it because I'm a big fan of Zigra from Gamera. So
Okay.
there was a Zigra prototype I saw on eBay, and the starting bid was like $40 or something, and I was trying real hard to get this thing. He was like a reddish color with a little bit of white. He looked like the one that's got the like the sound one had like the button on it, but
Okay.
it was without the launching horn on it. So it was like the prototype before they almost made the hole where the horn comes out.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was.
I didn't win that. I didn't win it. No.
Oh, you didn't win that one. Okay.
I mean, I had 3 or 4 Zigra prototypes, but I didn't get them on eBay. One of them was unpainted, and I have photos of that. It was like cream color with like a blue head or something like that. And then there was another one that was resin that was like metallic light blue. That was cool. And then there was another one metallic purple.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I let those go. You know, I mean, I love all of Trendmasters, but I mean, if I would have kept every single thing, you know, that I ever purchased prototype wise, we'd need another house.
I was going to ask, could you use your magic and help me find one of them?
Well, I just sold a Zigra. How long ago? Well, there was a guy that came to me wanting Gamera prototypes, and then I found somebody that was offering some, and I put the money out, and then to get them, and then when I went back to the guy, he basically screwed me over a month of lies. Okay, yeah, I'll get it to you today, or I don't hear from him, and it's like next week. Oh yeah, no, I'll get it today, this Friday, and just bear with me. And it just went on and on and on. I was really pissed off. I'm like, I probably wouldn't have bought them if he didn't ask me to, and I had sold him other things in the past. So I found somebody that you know, because I was out a couple of $1,000s for everything that I bought. And so another guy who I'd sold to before came to me and said, "You still have these? I'll take them." And I was like, "Wow, you're helping me a lot." I mean, I even cut the price down, right? I just, you know, you take what you can get is what I say. That's the motto I go with, because I'll never forget. I had a guy that I knew way back in 2004. I didn't know him, but I found him, I think, through eBay. And he was a big prototype guy. Didn't work for Trendmasters, didn't really collect this stuff, but he had Trendmaster prototypes. And I remember he emailed me a photo of a deluxe 10-inch animated Godzilla that was resin. And I was still very, very new. I don't even think I had the catalog at that time. And the Godzilla was like a dark, dark, dark blue. And it had like, and first thing I said is, well, that doesn't look like Godzilla, you know, from the series.
Yeah.
And he sent me a couple of photos. He said $75 if you want. He says the tip of the tail is broken. I saved the photos. I still have them. I have banged my head against the wall for years saying, you let that thing go for $75? It was a repaint. So Trendmasters was notorious for repainting, especially their Godzilla toys. Like I have a resin one that's kind of blackish with the white underbelly and the light blue fins, which is the typical look. Then I have another resin that's kind of like a light tan color, and there's a different design on the fins. So I finally came to realize when I saw the pictures and I had the catalog, I said, well, Jesus, that's the same thing. And it was one solid piece of resin, so no articulation. And it obviously would have been at Toy Fair. So I remember 16 years after that, it was bugging me again. I was looking at the photos, and I wrote back to the seller who had it, and I said, any chance you can remember who you sold this to? He's like, no. I said, well, how about you go and check back, you know, through your PayPal, because you can, I think that stuff becomes archived. And he's like, no. He said, that was back when I didn't have PayPal. The guy paid me with a money order. And I was like, you know, like I was out of luck. And it has never surfaced ever again. I've never seen a photo of it. No one's ever talked about it. And I've put photos of it out there. And I'm just, you know, that type of thing just makes me bite my hand. I said, why would you say no? Remember that thing, take what you can get, regardless of the price. Do it. Find a way to make it happen, or else you will forever regret it. Yeah. So and Matt, Matt Frank was a prime example, because he was like, I think he actually said the same thing. When he went back to the table to get that $400 thing, it was gone. Right? Because obviously it would be. And people say to me, I've had, actually, I think Chris, I think, our mutual friend Chris said to me, why are you ever going to set up, your prototypes at G-Fest? And I'd be like, why would I do that? Why would I? That's like putting, raw meat in front of piranhas. Like I don't need to have somebody walk away with something, right? I mean, they look nicer on photos. You don't need to see them in person or walk around them or hold them. That's just, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, just show up with 3 tablets so that they can order them from the table at G-Fest, and they're just like, why wouldn't you bring them here? Oh, why wouldn't I have a table full of things worth thousands of dollars each? I can't imagine why. Good sir, would you like to look at the tablet? I guess I can get a cardboard cutout of myself and then send some billboard images and just put myself in front of it, and with a recording, not for sale. Please keep your hands off the table.
Yeah. So this is a question I was going to ask. It's you did mention Cyber Godzilla a lot in the animated series. What's your honest opinion on the '98 Godzilla?
Well, I didn't mind it. People say, well, the whole, what's it called? What do they say? Gino, they say whatever it is. That to me is just completely ridiculous. I'll be honest. I mean, Godzilla in name only. I mean, you know what? Who cares? He could look like Barney the dinosaur to me. I wouldn't care. If it has Godzilla in the name, I'm going to go and see it. And people would say that's not Godzilla. I said, well, last I checked on the DVD, it says Godzilla. So I'm going to take that. And, it was a decent monster movie, but it was a little bit weird that they didn't have another kaiju for him to fight, and that, he dies with the explosion or whatever on the bridge. But people would say, oh, they didn't even use a suit actor, whatever. And then I start producing photos of them that they did use a suit actor, and some of the animation was really cool, like the miniatures and all that stuff. I thought was pretty brilliant. So, it's not a great, movie by any means, but then people say, well, if it didn't have the Godzilla name, then it would just be a good popcorn film for, a monster movie. The animated line for me was where it was at, because that totally redeemed all of the backlash that the movie got. And I was, like I said, I came to that very late, and, I have the DVD set with all 40 episodes, because I think there was 2 that didn't air.
Yeah, there's 2 didn't air.
Yeah, and I thought, it was pretty damn good. And Godzilla had the nuclear, breath beams, and had other monsters that I thought were all like wicked character designs and stuff like that. And I remember talking to one of the ex-employees, and he said to me, "You have no idea what the other stuff they had planned for that line." And I was like, "Well, okay, so tell me." And he didn't. So I think it took me forever it took me 14 years to track down that, how do you say it again? The Quetzalcoatl?
Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that thing, it took me 14 years to find. And I remember I even went to the guy who designed the toy. He had nothing to say. He's like, yeah, that's a whole other story. That's all he ever said to me about it. And I remember when the head of Prototype contacted me in 2017, and he wanted me to buy his entire collection. And I was like, okay, what do you got? And he says, well, you'll have to wait till I get back to the United States, and I'll take some pictures or whatever. It took months. Okay. And finally, months after he was back in the United States, then he contacted me and said, okay, I took pictures of everything. I got to organize it. He says, we could do the deal, and then next summer you'll get them. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. So again, waiting. So I remember it was it about a month and a half or 2 months after he got back to where he was living overseas, and he sent me over 500 photos. And then the one that really got my attention when it said animated Godzilla, literally I was falling out of my chair. He had a complete set of the resin animated Godzilla, like all of the toys, and repaints. And I have a Cyber Godzilla that's purple and green, like the Evangeline. Is that the Is
Yeah,
that the name?
Evangelion. Evangelion.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm thinking of. Why am I thinking of that? Is that a name from something else? But yeah, so people said to me, I don't know which one came out first, but the colors on that thing are amazing, and it's resin. And I remember doing a photograph with I had like 6 Cyber Godzillas at one time, and I was taking the very last photo, and I had them in a circle. I was on my knees, like kind of like doing a downward shot, and then just as I took the shot, the resin one fell over on the hardwood floor, and it broke in a number of places. It's got 3 spikes on the neck, which are half an inch long. Those things did not break, and it fell forward. And I was like, oh my God. So, I mean, it came to me with one of the arms broken off, and the seller guy, he says it's missing the right arm, but the arm, that's the robotic arm that was on the ground by its feet. And he had, like I said, he had repaints of the entire toy line, like the C-Rex and the Robo Yeti. And I was, man, that was made it all worthwhile. And he was the one that had the Mega Mutation Destroyer that was the resin hard copy. That was also plastic too. Like the feet were plastic, the head was plastic, the wings were plastic, the tail was plastic, but the torso to the thighs were resin. And I thought that's an interesting mix, right? Because normally I think it starts perhaps with is it super sculpty and then maybe resin or wax. I think wax comes first, and then the resin, and then come the unpainted test shots in the different colors of plastic shot and whatever colors are in the machine at the time. So for me, the more outrageous the colors, the better and more appealing it looks. Apparently, I had heard that there's like a light blue Destroyer 5-inch prototype circulating somewhere. Somebody has it anyways out there. I think it was at those Dollar Friday prototype sales at Trendmasters, and I still have yet to see a photo of that.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating. To inform you, Daniel, what the Cyber Godzilla is, since we brought it up a couple of times, and to the audience too. So the Cyber Godzilla is what becomes of the '98 Godzilla after the movie's over. Because in the animated series is a continuation of the story from the '98 movie.
Yeah, I remember it airing initially. I've caught a few of the episodes and everything.
Monster Wars. It was called Monster Wars.
Wars.
A 3-part series, yeah.
I just remember it because I don't remember why. I think the animation style looked so similar, like especially the monster designs to the Men in Black animated series.
Probably the same people worked on it.
Most likely, yeah. Both series were vastly underrated. But yeah, go on. Sorry, Nick. Yeah, I have like a general idea of it, but go on, man.
It's saying my internet connection's unstable. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you. Just
okay. Yeah, both of you guys froze at the time, and I thought I heard a pin drop. Yeah, so when you're hired at an animation studio, you basically have to blend in with everybody because it has to look like, if 25 people are working on the main character, it all has to look like it came from the same hand.
Yeah.
So that's keeping it on model is the term for that. So there was a guy in the toy group before I had to reboot it that worked on the Extreme Ghostbusters and the animated Godzilla line. So he had some wonderful stories to say. He loved the series and all that. And I ended up selling him one of those, those Hardee's Carl Jr. toys from that toy line. That was the only thing that was legitimately released, and those things started to sell for big money. And I bought my set for $40 in 2003, and I thought $40 at the time was a lot, and they were sealed, right? It was 4 toys, so it's $10 a toy. That's actually a really good deal. But at the time, when they were, I guess, originally what, $1.50, $1.75, $2 in the bag, So he asked me, he said, "Do you happen to have an extra one of these Godzilla figures you'd sell?" And I said, "Actually, I do." So I sold it, and he was all happy about that. And I got in touch with the guy who was the character designer and creature designer. What was his name now? Boy, it's not coming to me. Man, getting old sucks. You forget sometimes the simplest of things, but listen, you can Google the name. But I thought I told him, I said, "Man, your stuff is brilliant. And, you know, I'm in classical animation as well. So I can appreciate everything that you did with this, you know, with these designs and whatnot. And he hadn't seen, you know, some of the prototypes before. So that's got to be, you know, a little fascinating for him in that sense.
Definitely see like a whole other side to something you were working on that you had nothing to do with.
Well,
Basically.
yeah. I mean, it's. I remember. I think when I got a little bit excited when I saw there were some toy figures of Arthur, because I worked on that show for 3.5 years, even though I really couldn't, you know, stand it very much. It was, you know, it was a job at the time. But you know, I know it was popular because it beat out Disney when, I mean, I worked on the episode that won an Emmy Award, so that was all good.
Nice. I think it's technically still going.
I think they finally.
I saw something about that recently. I'm trying to remember where for it that it ended recently.
Well, you know, the thing that bothered me about working on that is that, you know, Arthur is supposed to be an aardvark, right? Not like an egg with glasses.
Yeah.
And the same, you know, with Mickey Mouse, they had to cheat when he would like turn his head the way the ears would be. It wasn't structurally correct, but it would look good on film or on TV. And so the same thing happened with Arthur's head. And the moment, if you didn't draw the head, the shape of like that kind of egg thing in the glasses, then, you know, the director would send it back to you to fix. So, you know, I went through that a few times, but that was probably the weirdest thing on that show was the character design, I found. Because, you know, I think Arthur originally had an aardvark, like nose to it. And then somebody changed the design later on. And because that's what he is. He's an aardvark, but he doesn't have a nose. He's just like an egg. So I thought that was just kind of weird. But
when I was a kid, I read the first edition of the Arthur story, and he had a long nose, and all the other characters looked more like what the animal are supposed to be, like his best friend, who's the monkey gorilla, like looked more like a gorilla.
Well, wasn't he the best friend? Who's the big guy? Had the huge head that. What wasn't that a bulldog or something like that?
Binky was a bulldog. Yeah, Binky looked more like a bulldog. Yeah.
Well, wait, Binky. What? Binky wasn't the rabbit?
No, that was
Buster. No, that's
Buster. Yes. Okay. No. Now
definitely don't have the wiki up right now.
It
ended in February of this year.
It just ended.
It just ended.
It's finally over.
Okay. I'll drink to that.
October 7th. 1996 when it began. It ended in February.
Wow,
this year.
That's a pretty long run, huh?
That is.
Yeah, well, nothing beats The Simpsons, though.
No, nothing beats The Simpsons.
Yeah. I actually turned down a job at The Simpsons for The Simpsons.
Really? Why'd you?
Yeah, I went to LA in 1999, and I went to the studio, and they give you a test. Remember, I told you that you have to draw something or whatever. The test, I mean, I left there with almost like a foot tall of paperwork. And I started working on the test. And they said to me when I was leaving, if you don't draw the characters, all of them on model, they won't even call you back. So I was, you know, ferociously working on it. And like 2.5, 3 weeks, I gave up and I still wasn't finished. And I just, you know, I had a change of heart, and I said, you know, I'm not gonna go ahead with this. So I had all of the, you know, model sheets and whatnot, but you know, I mean, I was confident I was going to get the job because I knew, you know, I had a lot of studio experience, and I felt confident enough that I'll get the characters to look on model.
So you remember we were talking about the Gamera Trendmasters,
right?
Yeah. Well, what's so strange is like they kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. Like I think this is my theory. I'm not sure if it's true or not. I had a theory that when ADV got the rights to it on home video, and like they had their little screening for it and stuff, and people like Roger Ebert, I guess, got the tape, and other people, and that's when all the reviews came out hailing Gamera, like the new Gamera series that was coming out over in Japan in the 90s is like one of the best kaiju films ever made and stuff. I was wondering if maybe Trendmasters got the idea from the high video sales of selling the first Heisei Gamera movie of the trilogy, and that's where the Gamera figures came from like them seeing like, oh wow, this new Gamera movie is going to be a big hit. Let's try that, because sure enough, they called the Trendmasters line Gamera Guardian of the Universe, which is also the name of the movie. The first Gamera movie is called Gamera Guardian of the Universe. So I was wondering if that might have been it.
Well, you know what? To be honest, I honestly don't know too much about that toy line. That probably makes sense, though. All I know is the Gamera line died from a lack of interest, which was often the case. Doom Island wasn't released apparently because, again, of a lack of interest, because Trendmasters was already, actively working on the '98 toys. So the time frame, I guess, was too much, too soon type of thing. So, which is, very unfortunate, because the interesting thing, and sorry to stray off the Gamera question for a second, but what Trendmasters had planned was to just repaint the movie figures and release them in the animated colors. So if you've noticed, like I have 4 prototypes of the Ultimate Godzilla. And the first one I got on eBay, which was purple and blue. And then I have, a red and yellow and gold one. And then I have an all green one in different shades of green. And I also have an unpainted one. And I thought, so I learned from one of the ex-employees that it was, I call it the Ultimate Animated Godzilla. It's a hybrid, right? Because they took the movie version and then they repainted it in what they believed the animated colors would be, because the style guides weren't completed at the time.
Yeah.
So when they did get the style, and I had style guides for both the Godzilla movie and the animated series. So I kept the one from the animated series because I just absolutely love everything connected to that. But the movie version one was not as exciting. It had some product things or whatever, but so and that was the style guide, which would have the characters and stuff like that. So I guess when Trendmasters got that, they scrapped the entire idea of repainting the movie figures, because you're looking at saving money, because the molds are already done, right? But the colors were so fantastic, like, purple and red and green Ultimates. I heard there's a yellow Ultimate. I heard there's an orange Ultimate. I heard there's a black and white Ultimate. I heard there's an Ultimate Godzilla in the animated colors with the blue fins and whatnot. So once you see those, look at them, hold them, whatever, you cannot look at the movie version anymore. I find, you do, obviously, because it's big, you can't not look at it, but it's nowhere near as appealing as these wild colors, I found. So with the Gamera line, I thought Trendmasters was so unique and so creative because they put their own spin on everything. And, again, I think that some of the figures were maybe muscular. I don't know if you guys hear the cats in the background, but we got kittens. Okay,
no,
they're pretty loud, but yeah. So it's all I heard from one of the designers was that the line died because the lack of interest. So it's I can't really comment because I don't even know if I've remember watching. I mean, I know who Gamera is, of course, but I don't know if I can honestly say I ever watched a full movie or just saw clips. And that's not because I didn't want to. I mean, I grew up, in the 70s and 80s when, you had WUAB channel 43, and that's where I saw the Godzilla, movies, my favorite being Destroy All Monsters and stuff like that. And they had, what was the guy's name who was the host? I think he recently died. He wore kind of like a weird superhero costume. And I know, I just thought you get so excited for the Saturdays, and they'd have those like monster afternoon matinees or whatever it was.
Yeah, the TNT Monster Vision thing, I think it's called.
The programming would have been different a little bit in the U.S. compared to Canada, but not on all things. But back then it was just great. I'd say you think about the cartoons. Bugs. I mean, when I'm teaching, when I was teaching at a class on Monday, I mentioned to the kids, so you guys know like Bugs Bunny and the Flintstones and everything, and they look at me like I see tumbleweeds blowing through the classroom, and I'm like, wow. And they're telling me some of the popular cartoons. I'm shaking my head like yes, but I'm going in my head no. I have no idea what that is. Things change, and it's just the cartoons were just where it was at in the 70s and 80s and whatnot, right? I mean, even thinking about the Flintstones, because my son loves that show, and we went through, I think, 6 or 7 box sets of all 6 seasons. And I mean, that show was absolutely brilliant, right? I mean, it's they dealt with cheating, lying, gambling, and I thought, well, it's a kid show, but it was actually geared towards adults. Heavily inspired by the Honeymooners, which you guys probably don't even know what that is.
Well, I was going to say that's probably like Hanna-Barbera's trademark. Honestly, has kind of become, especially in hindsight, is the fact that the children's programming, everything from the Flintstones to later on, like even Dexter's Laboratory and their contemporaries, like there was always adult jokes in there because they knew if the kids are hogging the TV for cartoons, the adults are probably somewhere in the background having to deal. And Hanna-Barbera is basically like your top standard of this is how you incorporate enough to entertain the adult audience or the older audience, but not lose the ability to sell toys to children.
Right.
It's
right.
Which is the end result or the end hope for basically every show or of some kind, not specifically action figures anymore. But it has been a lot like there isn't much for like the reign of Hanna-Barbera anymore.
That's sad. It's only Funko that kind of nailed some of the Flintstone figures, which they did. What were they called? They did repaints, and I there was like 4 sets of them. Some of them there was only 48 sets made. Some was like 240 sets or whatever. I have, I think, 3 of the 4. And, they had like with white shirts instead of Fred and the orange, and Barney had green hair or dark blue hair or red hair, something like that. I love stuff like that. Yeah. But then I'm not a fan of the pop line at all. But I see those things, like I came across something on eBay and the dude had it like listed at $8,000 because it was I think it was only like 48 or 24 of them made. And I'm like, yeah, sorry, not for me, but hey, we like what we like. But I was just kind of shocked because this wasn't a vintage toy. I think it was maybe within the past 2 years. It was $8,000. Jesus, I guess I must be, I mean, look at the Funko mailing list. I don't know what's going on.
I mean, if you want to talk about like extreme price increase for limited edition merchandise for it, the video game industry has definitely topped the charts in recent years. I mean, with the Legendary Edition, the collector's kit stuff, the figures you can only get if you bought or pre-ordered the top selection to it, that kind of thing.
Right.
As well. And then, because you can go on eBay and if you look for like the Mass Effect 3 release Shepard figure, I'm pretty sure that's worth a fair amount still.
I don't even know what that is.
So, major sci-fi.
I don't get out much.
Major sci-fi video game series that didn't flop, but kind of went out with a whimper.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I know with the Jurassic Park toys now, because I've been starting to get into those. I was slow. I think Mr. Mibbs told me, he said that the dinosaur fan base is much larger than Godzilla. And that I didn't know that. And yet when all the new Jurassic toys were coming out, you see people buying 5 or 10 of them thinking that that's going to be worth the big money, but it's probably not. You know what I mean? Like I remember I used to collect comics as a kid in the 70s. Believe it or not, my older brother, he was 2 years older than me. We lived in this small, like London, Ontario, and it was not very, I don't know what the population was, but we had an amazing contact with a used bookstore. And I would be like, 13 years old, 14 years old. And he used to call us every time people would bring comics into the store to sell. He gave us first pick. Well, we actually bought Superman 1 and 2 from 1938. Could you believe that? I have no photos of it, no technical proof of it, but I remember when I don't know how long my brother kept it or how, what he paid for it, but 2 guys this is like totally Men in Black, 2 guys in black business suits with handcuffed briefcases attached to them came to the house and bought them. And because people said, you didn't have Superman 1 and 2. That's from 1938. Yeah, That's what we had. Well, you think in Action Comics? Action Comics, I think, is one of the most expensive or valuable comic books in the entire world.
I don't even want to know what the prices are.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, obviously, if my brother would have kept those today, they'd be worth a fortune, even if they were a little bit, chewed up. I mean, I don't remember if I ever touched it, or whatever, but we had them. And so we had all these comic books, and I remember, God, even when I was in animation college, I was short of paying, the program. I ended up selling off a lot of the comics to one of my animation professors. So that was a good save. But I mean, I how did we even get to the comics? I don't know. Was it something?
We were talking about rarity, and you kind of went into that.
Oh, right,
rarity to it, and then
and Jurassic Park and all that. Yeah, because I remember
the fact that dinosaurs have a bigger audience.
Right, like you remember when McFarlane the first Spawn issue came out? I think everyone was trying to buy at least 10 copies or whatever. But then there was more rare ones based on some kind of the code or the little, what are those things called? Not the price code. There was some kind of stamp thing on the cover, and they made different variants that would kind of trick you. And you're like, is this the valuable one? But let me buy 10 of them. Turns out that wasn't the valuable one, So it's usually the things that you think are going to be valuable are not. It's the things that you don't think are going to be valuable. It was always the opposite, I found.
It's always the thing you threw away 20 years ago.
Yeah, or you let your mother give away to, the children's hospital, which is great, but it's probably lost and gone forever type of thing. So.
Yeah. So I know the story of what happened with the Image Comics thing. It's actually a pretty funny story. A guy did a 10-minute video covering the thing. In short, what it was around the 90s, there was the big story about a guy who sold a Batman comic from the 30s, and he got tons and tons of money, and the guys over at Image Comics and Marvel got the idea. It's wait a minute, let's do limited edition issues, and we can recreate this comic book market thing, and instead it created a bubble because, well, part of the reason why that worked was because not many people were comic collecting back then. And then when it became a big comic biz with the 90s comics and stuff, it didn't work. Trying to artificially recreate it just failed on its head. And that's when the comic book crash of 1997 happened, and Marvel was going bankrupt and stuff because of that. Because just they tried to artificially create the market bubble thing, which made the first editions of comics so rare and was creating those crazy stories. But the thing is, you couldn't do it because comics are popular. The reason that worked was because their comics weren't that popular, so there wasn't that many prints. But now comics are popular, you kind of get the idea. They try to artificially do that, and it didn't work. So,
well, a sign of the times, I guess, huh?
Yeah, sign of the times. Yeah. What was? Yeah. Bringing back to the Gamera thing I was going to mention earlier. I always thought what was interesting was they took the two Heisei designs from the first Gamera movie that came out, which was they took Gaius's redesign they did for Guardian of the Universe, the first of the trilogy, and they took Gamera's redesign. They made the Trendmasters figures of. But what was interesting is they went all the way back to the Showa era, the first couple movies, all the entire monster of the first series, and aside from Gaius, who they used the redesign from the trilogy, who they brought back, they redesigned all the other Showa monsters and just revamped them. And again, they did that thing like you said, the muscles and stuff. A great example is Guiron. He's the one's got the knife head on him.
Yeah, he's my favorite one.
Yeah, Guiron. He's like a cyborg monster. So I'm trying to get Daniel into Gamera because he has no idea about the crazy monsters in it, like Barugun, who shoots a rainbow out of his back that makes things explode, or Guiron, who shoots ninja stars out of his head, and his entire face is a blade.
I have several questions about the design of said ninja stars and how this monster would happen now.
I have to interject for a second because while we're laughing about this, and I remember, I got into this is interesting. I don't even know if I should mention this because there was someone that still wasn't able to pinpoint who I was, because you guys know the Club Tokyo board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Club Tokyo. Yeah.
Okay, so I was on one of the forums, and I had posted a picture of the most amazing classic Godzilla toy that I'd ever seen in one of these catalogs, and it was the tail was ridiculously long. It went up and had a bend like above Godzilla's head, and he had this fierce look and a big thick neck and all that stuff. And I thought it was the coolest thing, and I posted it, and I was attacked by about 100 of other members that said to me it's a piece of crap and that's so off model and all this stuff. And I was doing my best to defend it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a nutshell, I was saying stuff like, wait a minute, you guys are criticizing Trendmasters for having the muscles and stuff. But then when you see some of the movies, it looks as fake as can be. That it's just somebody in a rubber suit. Like, I mean, so that's fake, but, you know, Trendmasters have their own design, put some muscles on them. I don't, you know, it's in all senses of the word. I think it's kind of like a pointless argument. You know what I mean? Like you're arguing, it doesn't look on model, but then you've got people in rubber suits that look so fake. But then, you know, it's like, so it was a big, anyways, from that. And the beautiful thing that came out of that is all of a sudden this one guy popped up and very casually said, I have that figure. And I caught that, right? And I said, well, no. So I wrote to the guy and I said, well, you can't have that figure. It was never released. He goes, no, I have that figure. So I kept in touch with him. And sure enough, this guy had a ridiculous collection. I mean, he had a house, and it's like in every single room was toys, not prototypes or anything like that. And he was a big Godzilla fan, but he wasn't like just Godzilla. He was collecting everything: werewolves, Dracula, Universal monsters, whatever it was. And I said, well, now you kind of perked my curiosity. So I kept in touch with him, and then finally said to me, I don't know how many months, was it a couple of months? And he said, or was it a couple of years? Because he couldn't find it. And I said, well, where did you see it last? And he said, well, it was on my Godzilla shelf. I said, okay, do me a favor, take a picture of your Godzilla shelf and send it to me. I'm just curious. Right away, I found it. I said, isn't that it? Like in, you know, right in the front row. And he says, oh, that is it. And then he took pictures of it because I'd never seen this thing before. And I said, oh my God, that's it, you know? But Trendmasters had to redesign it. So this thing was so unique that it had like a nice twist in the torso, so mean looking, and the length of the tail and the thick neck. I mean, I was sold on the design of this. And the end result was that they didn't get the sculpt finished in time for Toy Fair. So it was missing the back fins. So when they photographed it for the catalog, you can't see the back fins. You just see it like some of the fins connected on the tail. And I was the most incredible thing I ever saw. And then that this guy had it. He had bought it on eBay. And, you know, you can find it on YouTube. He actually took a picture of it before he sent it to me. He says, I'm really going to miss this guy. But the guy that wants it up in Canada is a bigger fan of you know, Trendmasters than I am. And I thought, wow, that so I have it, and it's only 4 inches tall. And the detail on this thing is just nuts. Now, when I was in touch with one of the big head cheeses with Trendmasters, I believe he told me that the designs of the scales had messed up the tampo machine or whatever it was called, something weird. They had a similar problem when they were doing the what was it, on Mars Attacks. They did the one woman figure that had the complicated dress, and that had also broken the tampo machine or something. And I don't even know what that machine is. I think they spelled TAMPO, and it was very costly to fix. But so they scrapped the Godzilla, but they did make a few prototypes. And this one that I have is completely painted. It has a button that you push on the chest, and it's got the classic roar. And it is just actually, you know what? It's if you go to my toy group, it's the cover photo. That's the prototype of it. And the thing, it still blows me away. And people can't believe it's 4 inches tall. Because, you know, Trendmasters made a whole series of the 4-inch, you know, kaiju figures. And when I took pictures of it beside other 4-inch figures, it looks a little bigger because it's super girthy. But I said the thing is just like, it reeks with personality and character. And I said, that's why I had to have it. And then sure enough, I got it because this guy just casually typed in, oh, I have that figure. And I didn't believe him. because I didn't know that it actually got that far, especially a paint. It could be the only one that's painted like this. I don't know. I saw that there was some unpainted test shots that I think were made with cream color, some clear plastic, and black or something. But this is the only painted version that I ever saw. And then there was also a resin version, which they also changed the sculpt. And they had made so his right foot is elevated, so the heel is up. I took a side shot, and then I made it. I superimposed and photoshopped some gum on the heel, just because I was in the mood to do that. And I don't know what I called it, the Godzilla gummy or something stupid like that. But yeah, no, it just one of the coolest figures they ever made. And I just I was starting to get frustrated having to defend Trendmasters. Like I imagined. I don't know anybody that didn't like the animated line or the toys, but I'm thinking if that stuff would have gone into production, a lot of the haters would have been like, you know what, this stuff is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it's really funny that they got mad about that, because I would have said back to him, so like, hold on a second, you guys are the ones that like the Marmot figures have like the acid trip colors and the
I did say that. I did say that. I did say that, and you know what? Years later, somebody quoted me from that forum, because I had said something very offensive to them about the Marmot and Bullmark figures, and he said, I don't know who this guy was, but it really irked one of these guys, and because I remember reading it in a different Godzilla group, and I was laughing. I go, oh, that was me that said that. Anyways, so there it is. It goes out there now if they're going to ever listen to this podcast and say, oh, so that's the guy I'm after.
He's the one that judged me over my mushroom psychedelic colored fedora.
Well, yeah. I made some sort of a crack about something that you would buy at an amusement park, and that's why you got because one of the prizes that you win from a claw machine or something.
Yeah.
So it was along those lines, but.
Yeah,
it was. I was laughing, but it's people still to this day. Oh, I hate Trendmasters. What? That's fine. You don't. We like what we like, right?
Yeah.
But you like Bullmark or the Marmot stuff. I don't. But I'm not going to attack you for that. I'm not going to criticize him. But when you keep poking me, I'm going to poke back eventually.
Yeah.
So.
There's been a joke for a long time about the Marmot figures that like the acid colors, like one of them, like I'm convinced like somebody like did some sort of drug to come up with that color scheme. So my friend had a theory, like there's just like oh hey, before you start using the airbrush, take this. Oh, what do you mean? Oh, this starts just going to town.
Yeah, it's oh, what happened to you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What happened to the? Oh, I lost the image. Okay, just a sec. Oh, there we are. My mistook.
No, that's all good. It's all good. Yeah, I got one more question before we just wrap up here. This is a big one.
We're only getting warmed up now.
Unfortunately, some of us have other things too.
Yeah.
But I did want to throw this out here before the last question, Nick, Jonathan, just especially with your animation background, if you'd love to come back, if you want to come back on at some point in the future,
talk about Arthur and Caillou.
Yeah, just to talk about working in animation, what it was like back then as well, and then like I don't know what the teaching curriculum, I guess, is like nowadays, if it's improved, hopefully, because you are.
Well, yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, I can tell you one funny story. When I was working on Arthur, there was a supervisor that was very arrogant and always in your face, and I had to get my my weekly work approved by him, and then it would get given to the director. The director would go through it. So I remember arguing with this one supervisor because I had a character with the hands on the hips. Now, if you stand on your, if you're standing and you put your like knuckles, like you're making the fist like that. Right. So I put the pinky finger out a little bit because that's what they do in cartoons. If you ever notice, it just they make you think of a good silhouette, right? So if I've often seen kids drawing, and if you imagine it as a silhouette and you can't see the hands or the arms, that's a bad silhouette, because you have to, if you think that way, then one of my professors said, think when you draw. And that doesn't mean like, okay, is my pencil sharp? Do I have an eraser handy? No, it's about thinking about like every single line you do, how it reads, does it make for a good silhouette, whatnot. So I handed it in with the characters with the pinky out. He sends it back to me and said, this is terrible. Fix the finger and put the finger in. And I said, I'm telling you, it has to be this way with the finger out. This, I guarantee this is going to be improved. And I said, the way you're telling me to do it, I don't think it. He said, do it. Okay. Well, next day, so I did it to what he wanted. The next day, I came back in the morning, and there's the scene that he was criticizing me about with the finger, where the director had criticized it and stuck the finger out exactly how I had it. So I went back to him. I go, there you go. And I did that because he was always, arrogant.
Just and one of the guys constantly on your
he was a supervisor. So it was amusing. There was always these weird things that would go on in the studios and stuff like that. You try to keep it to yourself, and you got your Walkman on or whatever. But when there was mistakes, and you're pressured for timelines and stuff. I worked on the Beavis and Butthead movie, the original one. They went to Beavis and Butthead go to America.
Okay, man, you are spoiling all of our next episode with you. I'm gonna have to. I'm sorry. I hate to interrupt, but I've got to stop you.
Okay.
Before we end up on 4 hours of animation. I'm late to about 9 different things tomorrow.
Right. Okay. Well, I let the cat out of the bag there, but that was a long time ago. Next time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nick, you still had one more question, my man. I didn't mean to pull you.
Sorry. So we were talking about the
all good
Trendmasters production. I had a question on so what's the process of how they make a Trendmasters figure? Like, just say like any in general. Like it could be, you bring up the Godzilla one as an example, because I remember you talked about the what did it start with again? You said a wax. Like, I assume it's concept.
Yeah, I mean the process is definitely very long, and I think I had even heard it's like $10,000 to do a figure.
Woo.
Yeah, wow. So I could be wrong. I was never in an actual toy company. Do I know something like that? For a fact, no. But I know, like I said, if I was had graduated from animation and I was an American citizen and I would go looking for a job, because you've got your guys that do the sketches and whatnot, and I guess they approve something, and then I don't know how it works if it goes and has to be kind of like dissected, how the toy would be envisioned with the arms coming off and where the electronics may go to or something like that. And then I guess it gets sent overseas, and they would have there was a Trendmasters office in Hong Kong and in China. And I guess they would start, the prototypes, and I guess they get sent back and forth. And then, because you'll have, I don't know how, if it starts from like a clay figure or a wax figure, and then it hits resin, and then when it's all approved, like, I mentioned this on the podcast with Monster Island Buddies. If you're collecting prototypes, the resins are always the one you want because they have much sharper detail. And I mean literally sharper, like the teeth and, the claws would be longer and sharper than the production, because they always soup things up for Toy Fair because it's easier to sell the line and it looks far more appealing. But then they have to kind of, what's the word? I think the expression is called, basically. Yeah, or dial it back or dumb it down or whatever it's called to make it childproof. What's that?
I was streamlined but childproof.
Yes, childproof. Yeah. So I had a picture of the Mega Mutation Godzilla in plastic and the one in resin, and I had an arrow pointing to the length of the teeth and the claws, which was significantly different. So the resins are far more fragile. They're kind of like toy statues. So if they fall over, they could crack or whatever and break. And I've dropped and knocked out, like I have I think a one of a kind 4-inch Destroya prototype, and that thing has fallen like 4 feet, and I'll stick out my leg to try to prevent the impact from being, because the velocity from 4 feet, by the time it hits the hardwood floor, it could shatter, and then that's the end of it. But I've had some pieces break off on it, but it's I think it's a long drawn out process. And how once they kind of approve a sculpt, then what I love about this process is when they have the crib notes, which is like black Sharpie marker. They've got little signatures, dates, and sometimes depending on where the crib notes are done, if they're done overseas, it could be in Asian writing. To me, it's like having a signature from an artist or whatever. And I think it just, and it's got the product review tag or sample review tag, and they'll talk about, this has to be changed or that has to be changed. And, then they sign it off and stuff like that. I would love to see the process of how something is actually made from drawing to, full figure. But I think now with 3D printing, a lot of the stuff, like I know a ton of stuff that Funko does is all done on the computer. So, I think the thing with Trendmasters too is that there's been lots of people saying, well, they've asked me, can't you bring Trendmasters back? I'm like, wait a minute, it has nothing to do with me. There was two CEOs. They started off in one of the garages where they had the business, and then they were two people that used to work at Mattel. And they took off doing the blow mold pumpkins, which was quite something. And then when things were falling apart, because I know when they did, the guy from the one CEO from Trendmasters eventually opened up his own business called Sepia Toys, and he lives overseas now, I believe. And he had kind of made a vow that he wasn't going to do licensed toys anymore, because I know Osmosis Jones and Spy Kids were canceled, and that they took a loss for that. And then when he was with Sepia, I guess whoever it was approached him to do the toy line for the Independence Day Resurgence, and I have photos of the prototypes from that, which I was told you can't release those or can't show those to anybody. And you know what? They look amazing. The aliens look way better, and the toy figures looked great. And I remember even saying to them, because this was there was a number of ex-employees from Trendmasters that went to work with Sepia Toys. And when that toy line fell through, the CEO guy, Russell Hornsby, he had said like he's never going to touch a licensed brand again because it's too much of a loss. He came up with those Zuzu pets, those like weird hamster things that they had. What was it called? They had like Kung Zu. They had like hamsters in martial arts poses and stuff. I mean, it was really bizarre.
I remember the commercial. I remember seeing commercials for those. Yeah,
but that was a huge multi-million dollar revenue thing for them. So I guess he was happy not doing the licensed toys, but I actually prefer them doing licensed toys. I got nothing against hamsters, but I thought from what I saw. That's the problem is when you see the prototype. That's why I collect prototypes, because when you see them and then you see the finished product, you're like, how did it start off like this and then end up like this? You know what I mean? Like it's an enormous difference. And like, I mean, the Osmosis Jones prototypes that I have, the head designer guy had told me that there was never any unpainted test shots or first shots made. Like I was like, well, what does that mean? They were all just made fresh out of the factory, painted and ready to go. So all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but years later, I did find like unpainted like 6-inch Osmosis Jones figures in Thrax. And I sent them to his wife. And I said, oh, by the way, tell your husband that these do exist. And she was upset with me. She gave it a thumbs down. Because it's like, again, here I am having to like, inform people from the company, and I'm not part of the company. I'm just a giant fan. So I found it to be very interesting. So I don't know, Nick, if that helps you answer your question, because I starts with a drawing, and then it takes a long time for it, I guess, to have a physical toy in front of you. So with all the even with all the prototypes that have come and gone through my house, and all the others that I've seen, I mean, it must have been millions of prototypes, millions. And I can't even imagine having these like $1 Friday sales. I'd be like sitting at the table all week waiting for the next week to happen.
Oh no, that answers my question perfectly. Yeah, because I was always just wondering, like, if you knew, because I remember you always posted the style guides and like some other, Yeah,
well, I have some rough sketches and things like that look. There was some for the Godzilla Doom Island, which is painful for me to look at because they're so structurally inaccurate. Like you know, I mean, drawing Godzilla, and they had like seemed to have forgotten like a shoulder on one of the poses, and I'm like, that doesn't work. And then they made the thigh longer than the other leg, and the feet weren't on the same plane. You know, if I wasn't in animation, I wouldn't notice that. And I said, well, that's amazing. But I am, you know, from my background, you know, that has nothing. That's not an ego thing. It's just like that's because I know when I've gone to cafes, anywhere you go, there's art hanging on a wall, there's paintings, stuff like that. If there's an error, it stands out to me like it's someone threw like, you know, fluorescent green paint on it like that. How did that ever make it? How did the artist who painted that not notice that? Because you have, you know, I think in our bedroom we have a painting from Italy or of Italy, and it's like there's a boat and there's all these buildings on the sides, but it's like they go to different vanishing points, so the angles are all off. And I thought, how could you have painted that if you don't understand perspective? Because that kind of is everything. So one of the most complicated things one of the animation professors showed me was a spiral staircase, because the vanishing points kind of are a big trick. And I've never even attempted to draw that, nor will I. But he had sent me, like, showed me some photos, and I was like, wow, that's just absolutely fantastic. And I wouldn't even know how to go about drawing that. So, you know, that's, I tell the, you know, because I have one of my classes when we're drawing cartoon faces, I get the kids to practice drawing circles. And, you know, when you think of a circle, you know what a circle looks like, but you'd never have any idea how difficult it is to draw. You know, so I've even had kids like difficulty drawing a straight line. And then, so, you know, and I'm somebody to boost them up, right? Because I'm like, did you do that? That's amazing. You know, because I've had kids cry to me, I can't do this. And I'm like, no, you're doing great. You know, and I'd go through it with them and stuff. And you know, so I learned from the kids too, right? Because I've never, if I was at the same level, I mean, I went to school with some of my friends who ended up, you know, working on or directing the Ice Age movies, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, stuff like that. I mean, there was like 5 guys in the 47 of us that graduated that were just absolutely, all the studios wanted to hire them. And I wasn't one of those guys, you know, but it was a very valuable education. And, you know, I was actually arguing with somebody from the Board of Education that was basically wondering about my program, you know, how well it would fit into the curriculum and stuff like that. And I said, you know what, art is art. I mean, you can't take that away from the kids. They need an outlet for the creativity, right? So I said, you know, even doing my classes, I start to think about, well, you know, if they learn about perspective and whatnot, they could end up being, you know, engineers, architects. It's all relative. Not that they're going to go from my class to being an engineer or anything like that, but it's like, you know, there was one of my classes I had that had like 30 kids in it, and I gave them an assignment to draw like a room from one corner to the next and try to keep things simple. And when I saw this kid's work, it blew me away, because I thought, wow, man, you're like, he was 10 years old, and he had drawn, you know, like I said, from one room to the next, and he had a doorway, and in through the doorway, you can see down the hall. And I thought, you know what, he got the perspective right and everything. And I was like, 10 years old. When I was 10, I was, you know, big into drawing, and that's why I got into comic books, because I was using that for help, but I didn't understand how to start off, like, as, you know, with their skeletons and circles and guidelines and, you know, perspective and all. I didn't have a clue about that. But this kid was definitely, you know, a wonder kid.
Just got it. Just could see it.
You got it right away. And I said, you know, you keep this up, you could work for Disney in a few years. You know what I mean?
And now we must jump topics again, or we'll spoil the animation episode.
Yes, we're spoiling the next episode.
Because, and you know, and that's the thing too. For, you know, a lot of design and creative work and stuff, until you get to high school, almost it's non-existent, depending on where you live. Like me personally, having jumped around to a few different states, I didn't get an actual, like, I got to go to the class every day and learn art stuff until literally high school.
Do that again with your arm. That's what I tell the kids. Yeah. So for drawing circles, keep your hands very loose and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Nice. Okay. So before we
sorry, we're getting back to that again.
We will, man. We'll set a date for the future here for it. Needs to get done, Nick. But for the designs and everything for the figures and stuff, it's just kind of been one of the big things I've always, or at least I've really appreciated, at least with the 3D printing, is kind of the ability to make more, I guess, for artists who are making like their own individual figures and everything. So the guys who are, again, not using licensed work for the most part, and mostly because it's, for the same time frame when Nick puts together a full resin sculpture versus a 3D printed plastic one, there is a huge time trade-off and work intensity trade-off as well for it. And one of the things I really like about just you digged on 3D printing a little too much, my friend. So now we must write that wrong. No, but it's one of those ways that's just been able. I think it's helped a lot of indie creators basically just fill their stock or expand their catalogs from the high-end work-intensive pieces, which they'll still have, of course, but then they can also just have quicker pieces that they can keep a lower stream of steadier revenue with and everything. Right. That I've seen for a few people with and everything. And you were talking about the designs and stuff on.
Well, I've had
everything.
Because I've posted videos and stuff of the animated Godzilla figures and anything that's unreleased or unproduced. People have said, well, can you ask Jonathan, would he ever be into, scanning and 3D printing this stuff? And I'm right away, I don't have to think about that. I'm just like, no. And they're like, well, why not? I'm like, well, you know what? There's a number of reasons. And one of them is I'm not a big fan because I've seen some of these people try to make 3D printed animated Godzilla stuff. And I think it's like in animation, if you keep the characters, like the two hands exactly the same, the two legs exactly the same, that's called twinning. And it's like, what Mattel does often, if you look at their T-Rexes, they use the same arms. So it's probably easy to 3D, like to flip it on the computer and rather than do the work and make the arm in a different pose. And when I think of the Cyber Godzilla, that thing is so dynamic. You've got a robotic arm, you've got the lean and the tilt, and you've got the way the fingers are positioned. I mean, that's completely unique. But with people would get mad at me because I'm like, what do you care? You own the figures. What's the problem for you to 3D print them? I'm like, well, you know what? You don't know what I did to find this thing. I spent hours and hours and hours. So you want me just to give it away to everybody if I 3D print it? And I said, I would be worried about the value coming down on these things. And they're like, well, how can that be? It's not the original thing. I go, I understand that. But the closer you get to making it look like the authentic piece, I don't want to, it's not my plan to be part of the people that contributes to that issue because, as I said, prototypes are completely unique, very secretive, and very touchy. And, people are like, oh man, how much did you pay for that? What does that matter? You know what I mean? Like, what does it matter if I tell you I paid $5 for it or I paid $2,500 for it? It's not going to change your life any, but that's my business, And the funny thing is, when people come to me and they want to buy something and I have it for sale and they get it, they're like, wow, I love this. What else you got? It's like the moment they hold the prototype, it becomes very addictive. And people say, no, I only wanted this one. I'm like, that's what I said about Osmosis Jones. Then I opened up the floodgates. I got Animated Godzilla. I got Doom Island. I got War Planets. I got Tarzan. I got Dexter's Laboratory. I got Johnny Bravo. I had Shadow Raiders. I had the King Kong line. So all that, I had like the bits and pieces of everything. And then I started looking around and go, you know what? Maybe that's a bit much. So I started letting go of, things like Casper and Dexter's Laboratory. I mean, Trendmasters had the license for Cartoon Network, and they were planning on, besides the Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Laboratory were the only two that released, they had Yogi Bear, Johnny Bravo, and Cow and Chicken. And none of those came out. I mean, I had like these really cool keychains and little figurines of the red guy. And I think he's kind of a taboo guy, isn't he? I think he,
So
He's
I'm
the
trying
devil.
to. Is it the red dude from Cow and Chicken or
Yeah,
him?
yeah. You know, it's the
from
it's the
Powerpuff
it's the
Girls?
red guy.
Oh,
Isn't he like the devil or something like that?
yeah, he looks like that. Yeah, he pretty much
Interesting
looks like
enough.
a cartoon devil. Yeah.
Interesting enough, I am heavily engaged in bin watching Lucifer. Have you guys seen that show?
First few seasons.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm on the fifth season. I thought it's so well written, and you know, it's. I mean, everybody was talking about Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad and everything like that, but I think I'm. There was the last few episodes of Better Call Saul. I mean, I love Carol Burnett, but I think my wife and I were losing interest, and we both said the same thing. I said, you know what? I think I prefer Lucifer. It's got the comedy, you know. It's got the sex. It's got the jokes. It's got the intensity. And you know, I see bits and pieces of Miami Vice in there too with the music. The influence of the music from Miami Vice was incredible, you know, back in 1984, 85 type of thing. But I don't know. It's my wife and I were really late in getting the whole Netflix and, you know, all those channels and stuff. But now that we do, it's like binge watching everything.
On a minor note, before we try and get out of here, for that binge watching thing, Netflix has announced
You can't go anywhere.
on top of the what I hope is their lower advertised funded subscription service. Like all their current plans stay the same, and they just introduce a new one at a lower rate that has ads. That would be the smart play. They probably won't do that. But in an effort to stop people from binge watching stuff, especially for their original content, they are going to go to a weekly release schedule soon for all of their original content when the seasons come out. Like,
Well, that's what they were doing with Better Call Saul. It was almost annoying.
yeah, and that's the thing, is everyone kind of got used to the binging for it.
Yeah.
Slight marketing problem with that. I think there's a few people on YouTube that pointed this out. The marketing problem to that is it doesn't generate any buzz or advertising organically when you dump the entire season on one day.
Well, does it matter if it's does it matter if it's not a current show though? I mean, I don't know.
It's not well, and that's the thing, is that's why I used like the original content mostly is what they're going to do that with.
Okay.
Because that is, again, the newer stuff that is coming out. And so, but there's been the case where like they're with their show, like Marco Polo, they just dropped season 1 and then all of season 2 once they were finished pretty much. And neither season had any like long-term viability, basically, even though they poured so much money into it, and it was actually very good, in my opinion. But it suffered from the fact that nobody could really talk about it except in its entirety. Basically, it's the week-to-week internet frenzy of, you know, okay, the last week's cliffhanger, how are they going to solve that this week, kind of thing. That's apparently become pretty vital to new stuff, especially for internet content through YouTube and everything. And so now Netflix is catching on, because Hulu's been doing that with like simulcast stuff for the anime community for a few years, not just Hulu, but a few others and everything. But talking about just getting everything out on Netflix. I don't remember how we got there. Apologies.
I don't either. I just hope they do another season of Wednesday from the Addams Family with Tim Burton.
I've heard that's gotten really good reviews. My wife watched it, said it was excellent. I still need to watch it personally.
Yeah, and of course everyone's talking about the dance sequence with Wednesday, and they've got the song "Goo Goo Muck," which was a favorite of mine in the '80s. I remember them playing that at the school dances and stuff.
Yeah. I need to watch it too, because I've been hearing good stuff about it. Yeah. And I guess with that, we'll go ahead and just wrap it up here. Just real quick, what's your favorite Godzilla Trendmasters line? I forgot to ask that one.
Animated.
Animated.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah,
Probably
about that. It
The
wasn't
Cyber Godzilla for sure.
I thought the guess was going to be the Godzilla Wars line, because just the variety of all the monsters that they had in there. But I mean, the Godzilla series line is also very good.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm sad they didn't make more of they called them mutations on the show, right? So you know, they did the Robo Yeti, and they did the C-Rex. It's funny because every time I post a picture of the C-Rex prototype, it gets pretty much zero attention.
It's a shame.
Yeah, in any toy group, actually I've ever posted that. And then you post the C-Rex, people are far more interested in that one. And I guess, the C-Rex would kind of be like the animated mutation version of Biollante. Because I think they were thinking in terms like that because the Robo Yeti is kind of like the Mecha Godzilla.
Mechanic Kong, yeah.
Yeah, that it's kind of a blend, right? So, I mean, I thought the Cyber Godzilla was an absolutely brilliant design, and resurrected from the aliens, the dead corpse from Godzilla '98. It all made perfect sense. I guess that's why they didn't need to make a '98 sequel.
Yeah.
Right, but
yeah.
And then of course the again Quetzalcoatl, whatever the hell that thing is called. I would have loved to have seen what other mutations that they were bouncing around or talking about prototyping, because that line just it had it, and and the weird thing too is like, I have prototypes of Nick and Randy, and they were going to do one. They were supposed to do one of Monique. She was another figure planned, but I don't think she was ever prototyped. The very first Nick sculpt they came up with, I have a resin hard copy of that, which is unpainted. It is 1,000 times better than the one they decided to go with. Like the pose has, again, a bit of a twist in the torso. It's got a meaner face. It's got a more dynamic pose. And it's what's the word? No articulation. So it's like one solid piece. Maybe that's why I like it. Because I have, there was a second toy line planned for the Godzilla '98 figures, and it was actually far superior than the original release. And they had brought in different sculptors, and so I have like they were going to do 3 teen Godzillas, which was interesting to say the word teen with Godzilla, but it was like a slimmer version of Godzilla that was, I guess, prepubescent type of thing. And it had like dark green fins, gray body with a bit of a black wash. And they did 3 different versions of it. And they did only 2 of each. So I have 5 of those 6 prototypes. I don't know what happened to the 6th one. I never had it in hand. But they also were doing 3 different prototypes. The Nuclear Glow Godzilla, which was in lime green with like green translucent resin fins. And there was a Silver Attack, which was all in silver. And then there was the Mayhem Godzilla, which was black with red claws and I think dark blue fins. Absolutely brilliant. And I think they only did 1 of each as a solid sculpt, so there's no articulation. And I have the Nuclear Glow Godzilla, and I know who has the Steel Attack, which is also very dynamic and cool. I do prefer the Nuclear Glow. And then what happened is the next stage after that, they added articulation and they ruined it. I found, I mean, it didn't get very far, but it was also resin. They extended the tail about an inch or even longer. And if you guys have seen this, the Supreme Godzilla, it's got a ridiculously long tail, like way longer than it should be. And I thought that kind of took away from some of the uniqueness of it. So when I saw them do that, something similar to the Nuclear Glow Godzilla, and then they added articulation in the jaw and it changed the neck, I was like, see, this is where things get lost. They seem to nail it with their very first sculpt or the very first solid piece they do without articulation, and then it's got to progress, add articulation, then things change, and then it becomes plastic, as a toy figure, and then it looks completely different. So that's another reason why I go after the prototypes, because I think they initially get it right off the bat, and then after all the the evolution to get it to the final product, it ends up losing a lot, and then I end up losing interest, it seems. So, yeah, there's a whole. I mean, it's like I said, a very underground, strange kind of community of collecting prototypes, and it's also very taboo. That's why nobody really wants to talk about it or show off their collection type of thing. So, but I was able to finally, here's an interesting story. The Godzilla Trendmasters in '93 made a wicked set of plush prototypes that were never released. And again, the very first runs of them were very stiff looking, and they were like all cream color, no fur, no claws, nothing like that. Very generic looking, but they were Rodan Ghidorah and Ghidorah, whatever you guys say, and then Godzilla. And then they made larger versions where the fins and the nubs and stuff on Ghidorah were perfect. And then they went with the smaller size that was less appealing. Like the fins on Godzilla that I have both sizes. And the fins on Godzilla on the bigger size were like kind of 3D and thicker, puffier. And then the one they were going with was just a single sheet of like felt. And so it's bendable and it's nowhere near as appealing, even though they look incredibly, amazing. They had like light up eyes, and there was a motion sensor that would make them with their classic roars and then shake. And they were canceled, I guess, from a lack of interest, is what I heard. And they were debuted at G-Con before it was called G-Fest. And the Trendmaster people went there. They had a table and stuff like that, and people were offering $800 per plush right there. And I even had a page of that, a petition that was signed, asking the people, begging Trendmasters to release these things. So it's I have no idea. I was told they were canceled from a lack of interest. I mean, these things they're sitting behind me. And they are just, they still have that like kind of new car smell to them. They're very firm. They're very well made, and they don't all have the working electronics and stuff like that. But I'm absolutely amazed that A, they're no longer here. B, that they were in, they didn't go into production because there was a lack of interest. I don't know.
They're made too soon before their time, before the whole.
I guess so. I guess so. It would be interesting if there was a reunion for Trendmasters and they went to the next summer's G Fest and they had the plushes and they were saying, okay, if there's a big interest, then we'll put these into production. Would that happen or not? I have no idea.
Hard to say. It'd be nice. So yeah.
Well, have you seen the plushes?
I saw the Ghidorah and the Godzilla one you posted. I really love the Ghidorah one. The Ghidorah one's really nice, and the Godzilla one's cute too. He's got like that turquoise color, and he's got the dopey looking kind of face on him.
Well, it's it just feels like you just described our cats. Our kittens have a very derpy look to them, but man, you put them, you pick them up, they're like wet towels. They just hang all limp. You put them down, and they run so fast they smash into things because they can't stop. It's like a wind-up toy. But no, I don't know. I think, again, so many failed opportunities that just, if they would have been released, would all the haters still be, bugging on them? I had posted, I think, an image of them somewhere, and somebody hit a laughing face, and they don't say anything. I'm like, okay. Why would you think this is funny? I don't know. They don't, do they look good?
Maybe it's because how derpy they look. Maybe kind of like, they have like solid red eyes. To be fair, so
but the eyes light up, right? The eyes light up.
Yeah, the eyes do light up.
Yeah. Well, that was a funny story I was going to tell you, because here's one of the benefits of me creating my prototype group. It's been around almost 7.5 years, and I remember I was in some group. And I think I had posted a photo of them, and some guy wrote, I have some of these. So I like I said, I pay attention to comments like that. So I wrote to him, I said, hey, any chance you have the red Rodan or the burgundy Rodan? And then he wrote back, he said, you mean these? And he had both of them. I said, oh, so you're the son of a bitch that I was, bidding against back in 2003, 2004. And so, yeah. He says, I don't remember. I said, well, the burgundy one closed at $67. I bid like $66.15 or something like that. You got it for like $67.25 or whatever it was. So we were in not competition. We were in discussion, and I said, would you be up to selling them? And this was what, 2016, I think it was.
No,
2017. And he says, I said, what do you like now? He says, I like Minions. I actually had a Minion Dracula prototype from this amazing company that made all of the best promotional toys. And this Dracula thing apparently was better than some of the figures that they were already working on. So they canceled it. And it was like, 8 inches tall. So we did a deal for the Dracula Minion, and I paid him some money. And then both of these Rodans flew home to me. That's amazing, right? Because if I was bidding on these things in 2004, And then, 14, 15 years later, I get them. Like that's, and that was the whole thing. I was able to get him to join my group, and then we started talking. Photos were sent, and he was terrified. He goes, "I've never shipped anything to Canada. I don't know if I can do it, whatever." And I walked him through the process, and we did it. We did the deal, and we were all happy. So it's and I get people are like, "Oh, whenever you're ready, I'll take the red Rodan, or I'll take the green Godzilla thing, or I'll take the." I'm like, I'm not. In Canada years ago, there was a store called Consumer Distributing, and the big thick catalog with the coolest toys, and you would fill out what you want. You put little check marks in, and then you hand it in at the counter, and then you wait for your name to be broadcasted, and then it's like there was a giant warehouse, and they'd bring out whatever you ordered. And that was like the coolest thing as a kid. So it's funny that I've got people like kind of waiting on you to die so that my wife could sell these things to them.
So they can be at the auction.
Well, no, it's true. Whenever you're ready, or whenever you kind of die, I'll take that. So it's.
I want to see the look on your executor's face when they have to go through that list. It's just all right here. All right, here's the 2 letters to the people he cared about. And 17 pounds of freshly printed paper and Excel spreadsheets for the collection.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's funny because there was wait a minute. Yeah, no, sorry. He didn't have the burgundy. I'm just getting confused. There was a guy. There was that massive Godzilla auction. What was it called? Godzilla of the World. There was some kind of auction house in LA, and this guy had passed away, and they had his entire collection, which was just absolutely massive. And the only prototypes he had a set of the plushes, and he had the burgundy one. And I ended up getting that. What was it? It was like $400 or something like that. But I said, you know what? You got away from me in 2004. You're not going to get away from me again. And I got it. So yeah, the other guy had the red Rodan, which was a one of a kind, and the derpiness, as you mentioned, would be because his eye, it's like a big plastic kind of button for the eye, but it's still. I mean, I don't know if you're able to add any photos to this podcast, but I can send you those if you want.
Yeah, I can do it.
Because you can throw those up on the screen or something like that if you want.
Oh yeah,
people some visuals. But I absolutely love the plushes. So it's I just tell people, you do the work, and you get what you put it, whatever you put in, that's what you get out of it.
I think that was the takeaway from our last interview too. Before we had a author and a comic artist,
Frank Parr and Wayne Smith.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is I'm pretty sure nobody took me up on my suggestion of get the catalogs so you know what to look for. But at the same time, when I started collecting, Trendmasters had been under for 2 years. So there was tons and tons of prototypes from Trendmasters all over eBay. The Iron Giant, Mars Attacks, Godzilla. And, I passed on a number of things, and just because I wasn't into them then, but I got into them later, and I'm like, Jesus, you held that. You could have held that in your hand. You were, the guy was offering it to you and stuff. And, and things were much cheaper back then, right? And wow, some of the stuff now with pricing and it's supply and demand, right? So those never match, and that's how the prices are based. And sometimes you just have to. And I just had somebody on my Instagram wanted to buy some Osmosis Jones figures, and I said, sorry. I said I let a couple of these things go already. And then he said to me, well, can you just tell me the price anyways? And I'm like, no, it's not important right now.
It's not for sale, therefore does not have price.
Well, yeah, but and then you come across like the bad guy.
Yeah.
Oh, he wouldn't tell me what it costs. I said, well, what does it matter? I said, if it's like 25 cents or 2,500, how's it going to change your life?
How much is it? It's 25 million.
It's
Dr. Evil saying it, right?
I've seen there's been a couple of the guys I've met through that have started up stores where they run and sell.
Just interject. Watching you, I feel like I should have a beard more So, because watching you guys both,
I
like,
just cut my
you're
back.
rubbing your chins with the beard.
We do it when we're thinking. It's like an unconscious thing.
There's and it's like, you want to look like you're also paying as much attention as you possibly can be, because we
Right.
definitely are at all times.
But you're thinking of last week's episode of Lucifer.
Oh man.
Sorry, I interjected.
Oh yeah, no, I think we totally missed. Totally
you're
lost our train of thought. Okay, it's all good. All right, did you want to do the? The basically you get what you put into it.
well, yeah. I mean,
thing for
in a nutshell,
collecting and pretty much everything else.
Well, that applies to everything. But I mean, imagine me. I knew nothing about prototypes. I knew nothing about Trendmasters. I knew nothing about Godzilla. I mean, other than watching movies when I was a kid, and I had to learn all the stuff by myself. I had to figure out how to network. I had, to find the stuff, and it's just like I never gave up. And anytime somebody said, "Oh, you'll never find that," or "Those are all destroyed," that just pushed me even harder to keep going, and it paid off. So now, now things are much easier, because even in my group, I can post something if I'm going to sell it. Hey, anyone interested in this? Sometimes it sells, sometimes it doesn't. Then I go to Instagram. Sometimes it sells there, sometimes it doesn't. Then I go to eBay. And, I don't like eBay anymore because I hate their payment system, their fees. And I hate that, people can be really rude to you, but you have to kiss their ass in order not to get a negative feedback.
I hate
that's.
So anyway.
It's also one of those things that, negative reviews, people will leave those just because they had a bad day.
Well, yeah,
you know what I mean? And it's like there are
it's not necessarily anything to do with you.
Yeah, and there are a few sites, especially I think eBay is the worst offender, just like you kind of mentioned, that they put way too much pressure on the providers versus the one negative complaining person versus the 2,000 sales you had the rest of that month that never had a complaint or issue.
Right.
And that's the one that's going to destroy your page or drop your feed or, drop your searchability, not those.
I think there's a meme. I know it's called meme, which doesn't make any sense to me, because I think if it was meme, it would be MEEM, but I say mem because it's MEM. But the thing is, I think there's a meme or something of Al Pacino, and it says you can do 99 favors for one person, and if you do one thing bad, that's the only thing they remember. You know what I mean? So again, that kind of goes what I was saying to you guys before. It's like if we're having an argument and it's 98% my fault, it's still 2% yours. So you have to everybody needs to take accountability, and of course most people don't. They just sit there and point the fingers.
It's easier than self-reflection.
Yeah, well, and that's why there's that. You guys are familiar with David Bowie, of course. I mean, he was absolutely brilliant in so many ways, but I love his quote when he talked about aging is where you become the person you always should have been. And I thought that, let that sink in for a second. I mean, makes perfect sense for me. I think about that at my age now. And I mean, you guys are so much younger. So as I say, don't be in a hurry to grow up, because it's all responsibility and bills,
and they don't go away.
No, they don't. They don't.
And just as a good, excellent capstone for this, again, with our thesis statement of we want to promote and encourage indie creators of pretty much all stripes for it. The hope too is that basically your day job kind of makes the bills and day-to-day life stuff taken care of, and then that just lets you on your off time focus on the thing you actually love doing, the thing that maybe one day could be a full-time job, or just something that pays for Disneyland every year. Either or. But it's the consistency to get it, the desire to get it as well, is definitely key for us all. And the consistency to just keep at it as well. And like you said, take your time. the bills will always be there. You know, the rest of life is always going to be there for us. But we've definitely been seeing a common thread for that. You know, take the time and especially do it the way you really want it done yourself. You know, since talking about the figures and stuff, the resin prototypes that were always these much greater detailed pieces than the main lines,
and they're always harder to find intact because at Toy Fair they were badly damaged. I have I think it's a one of a kind 4-inch Destroyer, and it's missing the left leg because of how badly it was handled at Toy Fair. It was the one that was used on the back of the Doom Island boxes and all the cards and stuff like that. So I don't know anything about it because it's not a mega mutation, and maybe it was the one figure to go against that other big the 4-inch Godzilla I told you about, because they're both 4 inches and both incredible. I mean, again, the sculpt is fantastic. It's fallen out of my cabinet a couple of times, and I said I'll yell and put my foot out so it bounces off my thigh and then taps my foot and then ends on the floor and then part of the wing chips or something like that. But if I just didn't do that, then it would probably be shattered. But in terms of age, because I know I won't expose your age, but I know you guys are so much younger than me. Have you how does it feel for you guys when Christmas is coming? Does it feel like it comes once a year, or does it feel like it comes every 2 years because of how fast time is moving? It's a serious question because if you remember when you're like 5 or 6 years old and you're the most excited at that age about Christmas, it seriously feels like it comes around like every 3-4 years type of thing. Now at my age, it feels like it comes around every 4 to 6 months because that's how fast time is moving. The older you get, time goes by faster because you've lived more of your life. That makes total sense to me.
I've heard that theory, and I heard it's also because you're starting to understand everything, and it's like you're become kind of bored of the world. Is what my brother explained it to me. Kind of like you're not everything makes sense to you, so you're not wondering as much as before, where it's I'm excited because what am I going to get for Christmas, and then there's the magic of Christmas, and then you don't understand how the adult world works all the way. Yeah, but then once the mystery's gone, then that's when everything starts to go by quick because your mind's not taking everything in as much as you used to, is what I've heard. That's a theory.
I think it can also very heavily depend on how much you put into it every year.
That could be it too, yes.
You know what I mean? Because I've got some family member so me personally, I tend to forget when most holidays are. People will remind me that Thanksgiving is 4 days away.
Well, let me just add to that. I've had people say, "Do you guys celebrate Thanksgiving in Canada?" We do, but it's actually in October.
I was about to say, y'all have it's similar theming, I guess, but it's a different holiday.
What did you say? What was that word you said?
Theming, it's similar, it's Thanksgiving, it's still a season or a holiday of giving thanks for something in history.
I think it's exactly the same. I'm not sure why we have it in the first week to middle of October, and you guys have it at the end of November, which is very strange.
I vaguely, there's a bell going off in the back of the mind that someone told me once. It's because it's linked to a different historical event, basically. Time wise, and so whatever event they're linking it to is was in October more specifically.
Well, it's like the 4th of July for you guys. We have Canada Day, which is July 1st. But we have Christmas the same time. We do,
and I think that's just from the social construct that is Christmas. The history of Christmas alone is a totally other subject. But anyways, but to answer your question honestly, it's more of to me it's almost another day half the time, because I am personally just not super invested in it. We don't have any small children.
Not yet, but I can tell you it will get worse as you get older. That's it's kind of the sad thing because I remember loving Christmas when I was under 10 years old, but both
Sorry, go ahead.
both of my parents are long gone, and I have two older brothers that I don't talk to, and I mean, you come to realize, if you're 30, you think that's old. Well, once you hit 40, so it's still pretty good, but then when you hit 50, you're like, things are moving at like warp speed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait a minute, didn't we just have Labor Day? And all of a sudden, it's like 4 months ago already, almost. You know what I mean? It flies by, and that's why it's even hard for me to remember what I had for dinner 2, 3, 4 nights ago. Like I don't know what's up with that, but oh, the great thing, well, you're already wearing glasses. I wear reading glasses too. The amazing thing is what I tell people, like sometime in your 40s, all of a sudden you wake up and you're holding stuff across the street to be able to read it. You know what I mean? I mean,
that happened to my dad.
That's too far, but it's like, what happened to your eyes? They just get blurry and everything, and it's totally bizarre.
Oh, yeah. All right. Nick, are you still with us?
I am.
Okay, you just vanished.
It's funny. He keeps popping in and out.
Yeah, it's
even his head. I see the Trendmaster logo there.
Yeah, it's the background. It keys the background out, but it makes me disappear sometimes when I'm moving.
And when you move, you look like a ghost.
Yeah.
You've got I'm thinking of Casper. When you're with the movement, you see like the carried over like shadow or shading of you or something.
Hi, I'm Casper. Can I keep you? From the movie.
Did you guys see that movie with Christina Ricci?
Oh yeah, of course. I grew up.
My favorite scene in that was when the in the kitchen when all the uncles are there and you just hear them say thank you.
Thank you.
I actually thought it was just Stretch that said that in that really like high pitched whiny voice, but it was all three of them I think that say it at the same time with the pancakes and whatever.
I love it for Brent when morning in the breakfast to do the ride of the Valkyries. They start going da 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 da.
Yeah, there were some clever scenes that probably went over our heads back then. But yeah, no, it's and what Dan Aykroyd was in that as one of the Ghostbusters. Yeah, he comes running out of the house.
You're gonna call somebody else if you're walks away.
Right. Yeah, no, that's what year was that? Was that 95?
95, yeah.
Wow. It's amazing because I missed all of the, when Trendmasters was at its peak, probably around, was it 94, 95, 96? Yeah, the whole main Godzilla line. I can't imagine, like, I didn't even pay any attention. I don't remember seeing any of that stuff in stores here. But I remember I had posted, there was a guy, what was his name? Was it also Nick something? He had a photo or something from I think it was FAO Schwartz. They had taken the gigantic Godzilla head from Toy Fair and it was installed at the FAO Schwartz. And I mean, the photo is great because it's just filled with, I think, Godzilla King of the Monsters toys. That's all you saw. Shelves and aisles of this stuff. And then there was the big head on top of the display, which is amazing.
No, that's really cool. We got to add all the photos of old.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go digging for photos.
Yeah, I can send you stuff. Not to worry. Awesome. Make it more interesting. So, and now when you guys do your the actual podcast is aired, you see you guys, or is it just all talking?
So mostly it's been you. So the way Zoom kind of records this, do we want to sign off real quick so we can go ahead and get out here too as well, Nick, and then we'll explain it to you just so that we don't have to cut it out.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, you guys edit the interviews, I guess, to take out some
we'll get rid of
stupid shit I may have said.
Less that so most of it's I tend to look editing wise. We look at it from like a documentary style. Like it's most of these interviews we don't know where half the conversations might end up, and so it's we'll take the common threads for the whole thing pretty much. Most of this for my immediate edit and vision, it's basically just the experience of collecting for specifically for Trendmasters on this one. That was definitely the main one we were kind of looking at with your help on it. And so all the conversations, unless the tangents are funny or we need to pad the runtime to an hour or so.
How long are they normally?
About an hour and a half, or I think at most 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, and then yeah, but sorry.
No, that's fine.
I said we'd sign off and and then explain it, and then I explained it all.
Oh, but
All
did we sign off?
Not yet. No,
It's still recording.
yeah, it's more of just a, you know, I guess the sign off is more of just a.
You guys
you know,
ever swear on the?
Yeah, it's we treat it more of a. I use swearing because it's how I emphasize my investment on the topic. I was and so it's, you know, obviously we don't get into full on tirades of strings of it, but it's, you know, cool shit's cool shit, man. Sometimes
Right,
you just
for
gotta
sure.
say it.
Well, I get it. I mean, you can emphasize your points and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but like as I said in my toy group, I try to leave that stuff out.
Yeah, I understand.
And my explanation is, you know, they're toys, and as exciting as they are, it doesn't help emphasize your point any. I don't think, you know.
No, I get that. And it also, I mean, it immediately does kind of help the atmosphere of your environment too, subconsciously even, just because, you know, it doesn't get as incendiary as quickly when you can kind of hold that back for all the discussions and stuff. Anyways.
Right. Well, I think that also changes the narrative once you start doing that.
Mhm.
You know.
All right.
So I'll do the sign off thing real quick. So thank you for being on here, Jonathan, and
Thank you for having me.
thank you for also being on here with me tonight. And we'll be signing off, and we'll have a link to Jonathan's Facebook group in the link below in the video, so we can get some more people in and check out his Trendmaster prototypes because they're really cool, and all of his memorabilia he's got.
Thank you.